Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Rules of Engagement, which is episode 17 of season 4 of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the 4th season episode Rules of Engagement. So Rules of Engagement is the episode in which Worf is put on trial for destroying a civilian Klingon ship in the heat of battle. It was an accident, but the Klingons are arguing that he should be held accountable to it, and they send a unfrozen Klingon lawyer to argue the case against Worf. And we get like flashbacks to the incident, blah blah blah, and then Sisko uncovers that it was all conspiracy by the Klingons, that the ship was actually empty, and the list of civilians on the ship were taken from a different ship that had already crashed and exploded 3 months prior. So it was all just a conspiracy to try to trick the Klingons to having an advantage of Starfleet so they could go back to raiding this particular Cardassian sector or whatever. So, I don't like this episode. Never liked this episode. I was always against this episode. In fact, I remember way back when, like 30 or so years ago, maybe 20 years ago, 25, something like that. I remember naming this as one of the 5 worst episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and my opinion of it has not really gone up since then. And some might think it's unfair of me, the reason why I really don't like this episode. But I don't think it's unfair. I think it's totally fair. And it has to do with Klingons being the bad guys. Now, if you've been watching any of my reviews of Season 4 of Deep Space Nine, and if you've been watching all of them, you're probably sick of hearing me talk about how I don't like that Deep Space Nine made Klingons the bad guys in Season 4. I think it was a massive mistake. And for me, I think no other episode exemplifies why it's a mistake more than this one. I think this completely exemplifies why the Klingons never should be made the villains, and I can't enjoy this episode one iota because I can't get over the fact that the Klingons are the villains and they should not be. They don't work as villains. And if any episode really exemplifies or showcases why, it's this episode. So, like, one thing I was asking myself recently on this rewatch, what if this episode wasn't about Klingons? What if it was about Cardassians? Let's say the Cardassians were having a trial, and maybe they put Kira on trial or something like that, and they were doing it as a subterfuge to try to argue to get more territories from the Federation or something like that. I think actually that would be a good episode, like, especially considering that they explored the Cardassian justice system and how fucked up it is. It would be interesting to see a Cardassian lawyer like study the Federation's rule and how they do the justice system, and send a lawyer who's like trying to play in the Federations and stick to their rule and placate them and be like, look, we're playing by your rules and whatnot. But of course, obviously, it's all part of conspiracy. That would actually make a ton of sense. That would be so in character for the Cardassians. It would be interesting. It would explore the villains that made Deep Space Nine great. I think it would be a fairly good episode. And again, you would have to change the main character to like Kira or something. Couldn't be Worf, because the whole point is to have the Klingons investigate the Klingon and be like, blood in your heart and blah blah blah. You would have to lose that aspect of the episode, which is fine. But I think it would be I mean, if it was like Kira, they could argue like, "Oh, you never got over the occupation. You want all Cardassians dead," or something like that. That would actually be way more interesting than this whole, "Oh, the warrior's heart and blood and blah blah." I'll get to that bullshit later, but yeah, no, it would be so much better. Like, I can't even overemphasize how much better it would be. And so, I'm sorry, like this, it's not something I can overlook. It's not something like, oh, Mark, just look past the fact that the Klingons and no, I can't. It's fundamental to this episode, and it ruins the entire episodes. And there's other things I don't like about this episode, but I feel like all the issues I have stem from this one thing, because if, as I said, they were like Cardassians, then some of the other issues I have maybe might not be issues, or maybe I would be willing to hand wave them away. But I'm not when this episode does the Star Trek franchise such a disservice by playing into this BS about the Klingons being enemies again. And here's the thing. So here's my point. And again, this is a topic I've covered before, Way of the Warrior Sons of Moog, a lot of times when talking about Season 4 of DS9. But the Klingons in the original series weren't really Klingons, and I talked about this when I covered the original series. They weren't So what I mean by that is the culture had not been developed yet. The culture wasn't developed until the TOS movies and an early Next Generation, and the two of them together. And I think especially later TNG, like Season 3, when they get into the Worf backstory, that's when they really hammered down what we now know as Klingon culture, and what has been reinstated throughout the rest of Star Trek, the rest of TNG and DS9, Voyager, Enterprise, all the modern shows. What we now know of Klingon culture was first invented after the original series aired. And that's when the Klingons were enemies. That's when they were bad guys during the original series, before they really hammered down Klingon culture. Now, in some episodes, you see certain elements of Klingon culture, like in the first one, Errand of Mercy, you see the core being like, "It will be a glorious battle," and stuff like that. And Kang, in Season 3, you hear him talk about, how, I don't think he uses the word honor, but they still have that sort of warrior mentality. We Klingons are warriors, and we speak Klingonese. And then you have episodes like Trouble with Tribbles, Friday's Child, and basically all the appearances in Season 2. What was the other one? Private Little War, where they're basically Ferengi. I mean, maybe like Season 1, 2 TNG Ferengi, but like they're more like Ferengi and Cardassians, or Romulans. Actually, they're more like Romulans, I should say, but maybe more sort of cheeky, which is why I make the Ferengi reference. Like, they're not as like flat out like devious or whatever. They're more like oh my dear Captain Kirk. And I remember like people trying to make so bull BS headcanon excuses for Trouble with Tribbles. Why? Oh no, the reason why he's acting like this is because he's trying to emulate human behavior. And no, just shut the fuck up, please. I know some people like to use the headcanon shit, but no. It's easily, the writers did not establish the Klingon race at this point. And so it just, you go back and watch, it's out of place and it doesn't work. So the reason why I bring this up is because that's when the Klingons were bad guys. That's when they were villains during the original series, when they weren't really Klingons. When Klingon, it was before Klingon culture has been established. So you might be like, oh, Klingons as bad guys work. No, it doesn't. Because they weren't really Klingons. Now, during the movies, the Klingons were the bad guys, and they were acting like this, particularly Star Trek 3. And then Star Trek 6 is different, though, because they were trying to make allies, and there were some Klingons who were against it and some who weren't, so it was a bit more complex. And Star Trek V is better if we not talk about don't talk about Star Trek V. But Star Trek 3, I think, is the biggest example of Klingons being, because they were flat out villains in that movie, and they did work as villains, to be fair, but I think it's before their culture had been firmly established, and it was more of just that one ship than it was their whole government or whatever. We had that whining ambassador from Star Trek 4 being like, "I demand justice," but even then, that was a bit different. So they kind of worked in Star Trek 3, but I would argue even then they hadn't fully developed. That was before Sins of the Father and all this other stuff that really developed Klingon culture. And so we mainly know Klingons as Klingons in TNG, DS9, Voyager, when they're allies. Now, I know some people might bring up modern Trek, but again, the less we talk about season 1 and 2 Klingons and Discovery, the better. That's just avoid that. Just avoid that. And I guess you could also mention Enterprise, because they were kind of, but that was early Klingons, so they were kind of villains, but they were kind of just a hostile sort of, I don't know, they weren't a main enemy or main bad guy, and it was before the races really knew each other. So, and also it's, I would say, a similar thing with Strange New Worlds, that the Klingons there is kind of enemies, but kind of not. It was post-war or whatever, and they're maybe trying to make peace with them, and sometimes they're friendly with them in some episodes. So it's more shaky of an ally for sure. And in fact, I wouldn't even call them allies, but still, I wouldn't call them enemies either, flat out. It's a bit more complicated in Strange New Worlds. But all that stuff came out after this, so it doesn't really matter. My point is, Klingons, as portrayed in this era of Star Trek, should be uneasy allies. They work way better that way. And again, this is something I've reiterated and repeated, but I'm sorry, that's relevant to this episode. It's going through my mind while I'm watching this episode. I'm this doesn't work. It just doesn't work. In particular, it's out of character for the Klingons, I think, for them to do this kind of Romulan-esque deception in this episode. Now, it might fit with the Friday's Child Season 2 TOS Klingons, my dear Captain Kirk, but those aren't really Klingons. And, and I'm not trying to say that the Klingons are a monoculture, a race of hats. They all have to be warrior, honor. I actually like the fact that there's a Klingon lawyer. Because I complained about this in House of Quark, how there were no Klingon accountants. There should be, if it's a fully developed society and functional society, they should have all sorts of occupations and establishments and not all be warriors. We need to have Klingon doctors and Klingon engineers and Klingon accountants and Klingon lawyers. So I do like seeing a Klingon lawyer. That aspect I do appreciate, although it's rare that I say this, but I think this was actually handled better in Enterprise. When J.G. Hertzler played the Klingon lawyer, that he seemed more authentic of a lawyer. This guy, he forgot to twirl his mustache. And he seems more like a Romulan. At the start of the episode, he's oh, well, if we win this war case, and then we're going to be able to take over the Cardassian sector and everything. I'm what the fuck are you doing? You're giving away your motivation. You're not supposed to do that. He said, twirl the mustache and be my evil plan. Like, why are you doing that? Like, if he was generally, like, trying to deceive the Federation, why the fuck would you spell out why you're trying to deceive them? I mean, granted, he doesn't say that he is deceiving them, but he's making it, like, very clear that he has ulterior motives for wanting to arrest Worf. So it's like, why? Why would you do this? And so I cannot get over this when watching this episode. I mean, the motivations, like the way they behave in this episode, would have been perfect. Perfect for Cardassians, or even Romulans it would have fit, but not Klingons. And again, you might be, oh, they're showing them to be dynamic. No, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I don't buy that the Klingons would set this trap by having this ship show up in the middle of nowhere to try to trick Worf into blowing it up and pretending like civilians died when civilians really didn't die, and then having a trial and sending a lawyer and to try to trick them into beating them in the avenue of like politics or diplomacy in order to have the Federation not interfere with their invasion of Cardassia. Like, I don't care how you slice it. I don't care how dynamic of a species the Klingons are and how they're not just a singular race of hats. This is out of character for them. Out of character. Like, why? Like, do the Romulans, do the Cardassians, or the fucking Dominion. For what happened to the goddamn Dominion, for Christ's sake? This gets into the whole argument of, oh, there's just as many Dominion episodes in season 4 of Klingons. Well, there shouldn't be. There should be way more Dominion episodes than Klingon episodes, especially if you're going to make the Klingons a goddamn enemy. Anyway, so getting into the episode itself, it does that thing that I don't like, because I talked about this in some other videos, even the episode I really liked, Resistance over in Voyager. I don't like it when the episode doesn't have a first act, when it just throws you in the middle of the story. The entire story felt very disconnected. Like, I saw the episode from the very beginning, but I felt as if I tuned in 15 minutes late. Like, and this is just me. This is maybe just my style, my personal preference. And a lot of times these episodes will do this to try to be all stylistic and we'll start here and then go back and show you flashbacks. I just don't like that style. I mean, the starting at one point and going back and showing you flashbacks, like, that can work. In fact, sometimes I love it, but not the way it was done here. Like, the way it was done here just felt very disconnected. It made me feel disconnected from the story. It made me feel like I didn't really know what was going on. And then when they did the, the testimonies in the trial, when they had, like, O'Brien or Dax, or Quark, like, give their testimony, and then they would show them in the scene, like, talking, like a very stylistic way, like when Dax is talking about her exercise with Worf, we saw Dax doing the exercise with Worf, and then we would see her in that exercise thing talking as if she was talking to the attorney or whatever. And they did the same thing with Quark and O'Brien. Like, O'Brien was on the bridge of Defiant, like, he says, hypothetically, if you were in command. So then we see O'Brien in command of Defiant being like, this isn't a fair question, blah blah. So this is one of the examples that I was kind of talking about, that if the enemy of this episode was different, I might have liked this better. Like, if I wasn't already so against this episode, if it didn't have me in a bad mood so much already, maybe I would like this storytelling device. But because I'm in such a bad mood, and because I think I'm already so upset with the episode, I think it's pretentious bullshit. And maybe, to be fair, like, maybe if they did do this as the Cardassians, maybe I wouldn't be so against it. Maybe I wouldn't be so against them starting the story mid-sentence. But That's not the case. It is the case that they have the Klingons doing it, so I'm already in the bad mood, and I think this is pretentious nonsense. It's like, oh, look at us, we're being so stylistic by having the O'Brien give testimony, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's unfair of me, but that is definitely how I see it. And that's not even the getting into the whole bullshit about him being like making the trial about what's in Worf's heart. In his heart, he's a Klingon. In his heart, he bloodlust. I'm like, when the Vulcan admiral said at the start of the thing, or maybe it was Sisko, he was like at the start, he's like, that's not relevant. And the Vulcan admiral's like, well, I do believe Mr. Worf's motivations are relevant. No, so they might be relevant, but to a like larger case. But that's what he's basing his entire case off of. Like, what was in Mr. Worf's heart? Who gives a fuck? Who cares? Like, it's about what he did, not what's in his heart. And I suppose, like, if you could prove like Worf like purposely killed those civilians, even though he knew who they were, then okay, that's relevant. But he never even tries to prove that. He never tries to prove that. He just says, oh, Worf is upset and he is a man with something to prove. So what? That's not enough to convict the man, to even like allow extradition, I would argue. And I think the Vulcans being highly illogical for even considering this. And yet towards most of the episode we're meant to believe, oh, Sisko's gonna lose his case, oh no, it's doomed. Like, that's what every fucking trial episode does. It's so formulaic. It's so like, oh, we're gonna lose, look at the hell of evidence we have against us, and then at the end they like bring it out and do some cool like, you know, speech or whatever, and like, or find out some magical piece of information, like, ha ha. It's so fucking formulaic. And by the way, it's also formulaic the way they had Odo like looking. It's like just like that episode Dax, when Odo went out and investigated and trying to find, something, that a smoking gun, and they couldn't find anything, and everything he turned back was bad news. It's like it was the exact same thing. And at the end, Odo just magically discovers the answer, and it happens off screen. He just goes to Sisko and is like, oh, I got the smoking gun. And then Sisko shows up and puts on the performance like, isn't it possible? And does the whole, by the way, Avery Brooks overacting throughout this whole episode was outrageous. He was like, objection! It's like, why are you yelling? Like, and then the way he's like, isn't it possible? Like, okay, calm down, William Shatner Jr. Jesus Christ. But anyway, and yeah, the whole thing with like the way they solved the issue at the end is just like a magical evidence that Odo just happens to discover. So Sisko, I mean, he puts on a great performance with the the whole, isn't it possible? Like, isn't it unlucky the same people boarded a doomed ship and they did it again? Like, he puts on a performance of fine, but he doesn't actually do anything to save Worf. It's all Odo. Like, it's all this magical piece of information that he finally figures out off screen. We don't even see Odo's journey of him trying to figure it out. It just happens off screen. And so it's like almost like a Deus Ex Machina, if you call Odo the god. Like, it's just a magical resolution handed to Sisko off screen. He did nothing to earn it. Also, by the way, another thing that pissed me off, which I talked about in previous episodes, not only did they send Worf out in Command of the Defiant with Kira just being, just a random person pressing buttons on the ship, and I talked about how that pisses me off, and in later seasons they stopped doing that. Because the argument is, oh, Kira's not in Starfleet, why should she command the Defiant? Well, if she's not in Starfleet, should she even be on the Defiant, like being a crew member. And if she is a crew member, I thought she was the first officer. So if she's a crew, either she's a crew member who can man the Defiant or not. If she is, then she's the first officer and she should be in command. If she isn't, then she shouldn't be on the Defiant at all. Those are your two choices. This whole bullshit where she's also on the Defiant but not the first officer is nonsense. But that's just me. So that's another thing that pisses me off. But not only did they do that, they also, when they were doing O'Brien's testimony, the Klingon dude was like, oh, well, if Worf, let's imagine that Worf had been injured and it could no longer be in command and you had to take command. And O'Brien's like, oh, I would have. What? Kira was there! So you're not only saying that Worf gets the command before Kira, a fucking O'Brien would get the command before Kira, and he's not even an enlisted officer. Like, what the actual... And I'm sorry, while I was watching this episode, I just couldn't help thinking of how much better season 4 as a whole would be if they never did this Klingon bullshit. They never did this Klingon bullshit. Instead, focus on Dominion, focus on Cardassians. This would be a good episode to have the Cardassians. But instead, the Cardassians were the victims. They're the innocent victims of the Klingons that the Federation is trying to protect. No! Betrays the whole theme of the show, and it does really hammer home to me that I'm not being unfair by judging season 4 more harshly because of this. I think it actively ruined the show to do it this way. Now, granted, For the Calls will kind of address this, where Eddington reminds us, hey, these are not good guys. Which, fine, but not enough. Damn it. Not enough to justify any of this bullshit. Now, I did think, to be fair, that Quark testimony thing I did think was kind of funny. When he was like, was it Bashir was talking to Impella? Was it Medea? And he was like, and they kept switching the woman. And then eventually it was like, no, it was Morn. He's talking to Melinda, and he turns to her and says, and we see Morn turn to having this starting just about to talk. And of course the Klingon interrupts, is like, can we get back to the question at hand right before Morn talks? So, it's a funny way to do the running joke about how Morn only talks off screen, but I mean, I'm kind of grasping at straws for positives. Oh yeah, and by the way, I forgot to mention the whole thing about the Klingon lawyer. I almost call him warrior, but the unfrozen Klingon lawyer, how he's intimidating Worf for trying to antagonize him into attacking him, which is such a cliche. It was so fun. I remember watching this for the first time and just rolling my eyes and sighing. I'm like, yeah, of course, they're doing this stupid bullshit again. It's so obvious what they're doing, and Worf is the dumbass who fall. And by the way, I know Worf can be really hostile, and can be really angry at times, and he can get pissed off. And for the example, the episode Liaisons over in TNG, which is not a good episode, but is better than this one, because in that episode when you have that ambassador dude who's constantly trying to antagonize Worf, and eventually Worf loses it, it's like, I'm going to rip out his esophagus, and eventually loses it and starts beating his ass. I buy that. I think that makes sense. I think that was earned. I think you totally get why Worf would want to beat his ass, but here I don't buy it. I don't think it was earned. I think it's cliche nonsense trying to play into this whole, oh, look at what a great case this Klingon has against Worf, just saying that was in his heart that he wants to be a warrior, which is so much bullshit. It's so dumb. I don't buy it at all. No part of it. And the funny thing is, I heard watched some reviews, and I heard a lot of people in online user comments saying that they love the teaser That's the first scene before the credits roll of the episode, and they thought, oh yeah, this is one of the best cold opens of the entire show. I hate it. I gotta strongly disagree. I don't think it's a good teaser. I think it was cheesy, cliche, the whole thing, having warriors screaming on the thing, and then Worf, having the stupid dream, and he wakes up and Odo's like, oh, you better ready yourself for your trial or some bullshit. Like, he was like, oh, it's 0400 hours, you better get some sleep. Well, why the fuck are you in there? Like, why are you just hanging around Worf in a cell at 4 in the morning? Like, I don't know. I think, I don't know why people would like that cold open. I was not a fan of it. I did not impress me. And as I said, like, I would have preferred an actual first act. I mean, even if you start the episode, like, where they did, you could still have, like, proper flashbacks. Well, what they did with the whole testimony of them doing the, weird stylistic, pretentious wankery, it's not... No, it's not good enough. Damn it. So the thing with Cisco going to Worf at the end and saying this is how you be a leader. I don't know. First of all, the Cisco being like, you're damn right, you should have checked, blah, blah. Like, I get it. Like, they're trying to say, like, Cisco's defending him and saying Worf did nothing wrong in public, but behind the scenes he's like, actually, no, he fucked up very badly. Like, that, I don't know if I agree with Cisco there. I don't know. Maybe I do. And maybe it does get into Worf's... I think this actually might be one of the aspects of the show I'm okay with and dare say like. Because it does get to, like, Gambit, for example, to get to how Worf was being a dickhead as a first officer and he needed to learn. Well, here they're getting to how he needs to learn to be a commander, and that he, throughout TNG, he's just been like, fire phasers, and always, like, wanting to attack. And Siska's kind of pointing out, like, if you're the captain, you can't be that way. You can't be like that as a Starfleet officer. And so I did kind of like that. I liked the speech he gave to Worf, and how, like, Worf says, I don't feel like going to a party, but Sisko's like, it's not about you, it's about keeping the troops happy. So that, okay, I did kind of like that coda that they had, but yeah, that's about it. Anyway, I would now like to thank all those that support me on Patreons. Very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I want to give a huge, big, gigantic special thanks to Brandon Neil Howes and Jordan Johnson. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D, Benedictus, Ricky, Manny Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Migalacio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we do indeed have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, rules of engagement, more like tools of enragement. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Hashtag Vic Fontaine got that swing. Now, I will say, Kyrie091 had 3 verses of the Star Trek Deep Space Nine song to the tune of Voyager was my instructions. But I wasn't going to punish all of you by by singing 3 verses of it. Come on. And why am I singing Deep Space Nine to the tune of Voyager theme in the first place? I don't know. I don't get it. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, this is supposed to be the same Worf who easily withstood the evil Vulcan and her water-seeking twigs pointed at him 2 2 years before that would make him die for having angry thoughts easily provoked in court, as if he had never been at court before. That alone diminishes the character growth and continuity we saw in TNG. He might as well be Tom Worf, the clone twin that was in isolation area for 9 years. We, of course, are prolonged into the Klingon conflict because I guess Berman, showrunners, whoever thought it would be cool in this episode. While an effort is made at the end of the episode to demonstrate Sisko as a mentor for Worf, who could be, I guess, captain someday, I'm just not thrilled with this episode. The twist especially is like, I don't know if phony Nailman Marcus Cookie's urban legend that somehow Starfleet never noticed before. Outside of the interesting approach to have the person who's being grilled in the stand suddenly be brought to the incident on the Defiant via their point of view, this episode still pales immensely compared to other Trek Court episodes. 2 bells out of 10. Yeah, I guess I just don't get the reference to Nelman Marcus Cookie's urban legend. I'm not familiar with that one. But yeah, it was goofy, the whole twist ending wasn't goofy, it's just goofy because it's the Klingons doing it. Like, if that the Cardassians do it, it would make sense. But also, the whole Odo solving the entire episode off screen. Yeah, and that's a very good point about Worf being out of character. Like, yeah, in the episode Gambit, if you didn't catch Norman's reference, when, Gambit Part 2, when the Vulcan, or the Romulan actually, no, she was a Vulcan, that's right, she pretended to be a Romulan, she was a Vulcan, where she was using that weapon that was actually shed. It's supposed to be the ultimate weapon that could kill people and their violent thoughts, and Worf was able to empty his violent thoughts and not be killed by it. Yet, he falls into a very obvious trap set to him to enrage him. Like, yeah, I don't. It's so out of character. Don't buy it in a billion years. Anyway, next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, I don't hate this episode. It's not great by any means, but the idea of a starship destroying a civilian ship by accident during a battle is interesting and would be even more so if it wasn't a ploy. It would make a good episode on its own, seeing our characters dealing with that and ditching the cheesy trial cliche. I'm not sure how I feel about some of the filming decisions, particularly witness testimony flashbacks, but characters in the flashback testifying in the present. It's a different, cool approach, but also feels a bit unconventional for Trek. Sisko does a good job throughout the show mentoring Worf for command. This is one of the best scenes of said mentoring of the show and best scenes of the episode in my opinion. I'll conclude by saying I hate the trial trope of attorneys getting witnesses to lose control, like that is exactly what the lawyer is trying to do to get you to do. Are you too dumb or hot-headed that you can't keep from admitting your guilt or stand, or in this absolute worst instance of it, physically attacking the lawyer? After I wrote my comment, I noticed that I pointed out a lot of the same things Norman did. Yeah, well, great minds think alike, as they say. The other thing that happened in the trial I thought was dumb, when, the lawyer tried to read from Worf's personal log, and the Vulcan admiral was like, no, this is against procedure, you can't do it unless you have Worf's permission. So he was like, goes to Worf and is like, oh, well, do I have your permission to read your personal log, or do you have something to hide? And that was a very obvious trap. And that was so silly, just the way he said that. It's like I wanted the admiral to be like, no, this will not be held against him, whatever, because it's like the whole Fifth Amendment thing, or pleading the Fifth. Like, you can't be like hold that against someone from doing that because it's their right to do it, and so it would be Worf's right to not let him to withhold the privacy. So the Vulcan should have spoke out and say no, will not be held against him. And Worf saying, oh, I have nothing to hide. Even over Sisko's advice was very idiotic of him. It's another really dumb thing Worf did. Now, I agree. The idea of having a civilian ship get destroyed by accident by Starfleet is a very interesting idea, especially having the crew having to deal with the consequences of doing so and how it would affect them. I think that would make a great episode. And this is not it. That's not what they do in this episode. Because, as you say, it turns out to be a ploy. But even if it wasn't a ploy, they make it about this stupid trial and them trying to find out what's in the Klingon heart. Where it'd be way more interesting if it was Starfleet officers actually coping with the fact that they made a mistake that killed a bunch of civilians. Like, I wonder, maybe there is an episode out there like that. Maybe someone can put in the comments if I'm forgetting one. But yeah, that would be a much more interesting premise than this BS. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, well, I like episodes featuring a trial if it is well executed, suspenseful, or featuring an interesting question like the measure of the man or the drumhead, but since it is clear that Worf won't get extradited and there is no interesting theme present, it's only mildly compelling. Interesting question, quite the opposite among the other things they discuss how Klingonic Worf really is, or rather feels, a topic we had over and over again. The Federation is more or less at war with the Klingons. The episode tries to tell us otherwise, but they can clearly fight a battle, so what else can you call it but war? So why is there even talk of handing him over to the enemy? I don't know any historical examples when something like that happened in human history, maybe after the war is over, but not during the war. The solution that it was all a Klingon deception is weak. Also a sign of weakness, a sign of weak script. Odo's evidence came out of nowhere. It's a Deus Ex Machina. I think Worf was right and Sisko was wrong. Space is big. A civilian ship could have easily flown around the battle zone or left the zone cloaked. But they decided to decloak right in front of the Defiant for no reason. The only reason would be influence and the battle in this case, that they lose their status of non-combatant until... they lose their status of a non-combat unit, in my opinion. Question to Mark. What is the best and weakest episode featuring a trial in Star Trek? My rating is a 2 out of 10. Oh God, I haven't given this any thought. It's hard for me to... I think the best trial, I would still definitely have to go with Measure of a Man. Or maybe Ad Asper Per Spera, actually. I do think I like Ad Asper Per Spera a little bit better in Measure of Man, if I'm being honest, because it doesn't have the cheesy mustache-twirling Maddox. So yeah, maybe Ad Asper Per Spera. I might even do that. Might even say good old modern Trek, Stranger in the Worlds. Either that or Measure of the Man. Worst? Wolf in the Fold. Like the whole I'm Jack the Ripper. And this isn't competition for worst. Oh yes it is. But yeah, I think I would have to put Wolf in the Fold above it though. Yeah. So I don't know, the Federation's at war with the Klingons at this moment, because the war doesn't officially start until season 5. But it is weird that they're able to like fight ships or attack each other and not be at war. That is an odd. I don't think that does happen in real life. Like if a Russian ship started firing at a U.S. ship, I'd pretty sure war would break out over that. There wouldn't be like, oh yeah, we're still having good relations or whatever. Yeah, but then again, we need our action in the show. that's why they do it. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, next episode, please, and I don't care about my rating either. End of transmission. Well, thank you for your input, Stephen. I have a feeling that you like this episode and you don't feel like arguing about it, but that is just my sense. Maybe you don't like it or you don't care about it. I don't know. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, this episode has a great cold open. While I would happily watch a TV series of Ch'Pok, Klingon attorney at law, I have to point out that the judge and the counsel for the defense are both part of the Federation, which puts Ch'Pok at a disadvantage. I find it hard to believe that anyone would be fooled by a censor ghost. I cannot work out if Ch'Pok was complicit in the plan to discredit Worf or not. Mark, what do you think? Yay or nay? I must admit that like Duet, the story would probably fail without the guest actor. I'm a sucker for a good trial episode, so I will give this one 5 bad dreams out of 10. Yeah, I don't get why people like the cold open. I don't know. I don't think it's a good cold open, but I think the dream's kind of cheesy and cliche, and having it start in the middle of the story being like, your trial's coming up, seems kind of cliche as well, so I don't know. I'm not a fan of being thrown in halfway through the story, so that is just my humble opinion. And I wasn't that impressed with Ch'Pok, Klingon attorney at law. I don't think he's that good. Like you're saying, he's a great guest actor. He's fine. Like, I didn't have an issue with him, but I didn't think he was great. Yeah, this is the same dude who was in Masterpiece Society, who played, like, the adjutant to the president, who was being like, oh, you shouldn't do this, this is against the founder father's wishes, blah, blah, blah. So that's the same guy there, and I don't think he's particularly that great of an actor in that episode. This one maybe does a better job, but still, like, it's funny because I remember reading a TV Guide article. It was about something else, like pointing out all the great guest actors in Star Trek, and it was right when this episode came out, and they pointed out this guy, and I'm like, well, it's not that great. I don't know. That's just my humble opinion. Now, as to the fact that if Ch'Pok was complicit in the plan to discredit Worf or not, I've thought about this after just watching this episode. And I would say yes, just because I think it would be, and then again, maybe the Klingons are incompetent, but I just feel like it would be incompetent for them to set up this, devious plan and send in your advocate to execute this plan and not make him aware of the plan. I think that would be a bad idea because then he might fuck up and give the plan away. So I think they had to have told him about it. Unless they're all idiots, which they could be because this episode sucks. But, I'm a sucker for a good trial episode, but this is not it. This is not a good trial. This is a bad trial episode. I think it falls into the category of the wrongfully accused trial episodes, and I think I draw a line, a distinct difference between wrongfully accused of murder, which I think this qualifies for because he's being accused of killing all these civilians. So the wrongly accused of murder and your other trial episode, like stuff like Measure of Man, Asper, Perspire, the Drumhead, like none of that is wrongfully accused. Or you could say, they're wrongfully accusing Data of not being sentient, or they're wrongfully accusing that one guy of having a Romulan paternal grandfather, whatever. But that's not what I mean by wrongfully accused. I mean wrongfully accused of murder, stuff like Dax or ex post facto or Wolf in the Fold or what's that one with Riker? A Matter of Perspective. And out of all of the wrongfully accused of murder episodes, I think Matter of Perspective is the best. I actually kind of like that one. A lot of people don't see the like. I think this is the best wrongfully accused one. But most wrongfully accused episodes suck. And you do have a couple of wrongfully accused episodes that aren't trial episodes, too. I had one recently, but I can't remember what it was. I think they're... Yeah, so... But no, typically they're overdone, and I typically don't like wrongfully accused episodes, and this certainly falls into that batch. Anyway, thank you patrons so much for your comments. So my rating for Rules of Engagement out of 10 is going to be a 2, extremely poor. In fact, I was kind of thinking throughout this episode, or this review, I was thinking maybe I should give it a 1, because yeah, it just sucks. It exemplifies why making Klingons the enemy was a bad idea, and I can't get over it, and it pisses me off every time I watch it. But on top of that, it's like cheesy cliche, what's in Worf's heart, and the whole thing with him like antagonizing Worf to beat him up and falling for it. It's like cliche nonsense bullshit, and the whole thing is solved by a Deus Ex Machina that happens off screen, where Sisko didn't earn the win of the trial. And it's just cheesy too, and the pretentious when they're trying to do the stylistic bullshit that they do. So all that irritates me a lot, and it does make me want to give it a 1. But to be fair to this episode, I did find it kind of engaging. Like, I wasn't bored through it. And the ending scene with Sisko and Worf where Sisko's being a mentor to Worf was a good scene, and the scene with Quark talking about Impella talking or whatever was funny. So okay, I will be merciful and save it from a 1, but instead it gets a 2. Extremely poor. I think it is one of the worst episodes of Deep Space Nine. Anyway, that is it for my review of Rules of Engagement. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of the episode. And if you really want to support the channel, you could consider supporting me on Patreon. There is a link to that in the description below. I have different rewards for different tiers, such as I do pre-releases and patron-only series of videos I do exclusively for Patreon supporters, where I revisit reviews I made. Stuff like that you can check out if you're so inclined. And if you would like to make a shorter comment on my video, even if you're not a Patreon supporter, you can still do that by visiting my Facebook or Blue Sky page. Links for those are in the description below. I ask for comments at certain times for certain episodes, so you can pop in, make a comment that's 50 words or less, if you're so inclined to do so. So let's see what's coming up next on the old channel here. So Monday will be my review for Innocence, the good old Voyager episode. Thursday, I'll be over on Patreon doing one of those patron exclusive videos revisiting my review for Hard Time. Another one I have an unpopular opinion about. And then on Saturday, back on my main channel, keeping with Deep Space Nine, to cover Shattered Mirror. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check me out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager, and many other videos on Star Trek and other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.